first item, and the first question is from Delyth Jewell.
To make a statement on reducing the risk of COVID-19 infections in factories and other closed settings.
Diolch, Llywydd. Jyst cyn ateb y cwestiwn, ca I just ddweud gair o ddiolch I chi.
Just before I answer the question, may I just say thank you to you and everyone who has worked so hard to prepare the chamber so that we can all return here today.
Llywydd, I chaired the first meeting of a group to establish a National Health and Safety Forum for Wales, as proposed jointly by the Wales TUC and CBI Wales. It will advise on measures to reduce risk in closed settings over and above the extensive guidance already issued to the sector.
I thank the First Minister for his response. I wrote to KEPAC and Merthyr Council on the 1st of April this year, expressing my concerns about a lack of social distancing and hygiene procedures in their factory in Merthyr after a constituent had raised alarms with me. The constituent was concerned that unless proper regulations were put in place, an outbreak of COVID-19 could happen there, a concern that was sadly justified. Now, whilst my letter to the company went unanswered, the council did take action. They told me that they arranged for the Health and Safety Executive to ensure the relevant regulations were being followed, and that they arranged to have a full-time Food Standards Agency employee at the premises. But we know that this still wasn't enough to prevent an outbreak of COVID-19 at the plant, with 135 people now believed to have been infected. First Minister, I'm interested to know whether you were aware that concerns had been raised about this plant and whether you were satisfied with the action taken by Merthyr Council. And given that the outbreak still occurred despite their best efforts, do you now agree that you need to look again at tightening regulations for high-risk workplaces, such as meat processing plants, and that our excess testing capacity should be used routinely to test workers who work under these conditions so that future outbreaks can be better contained?
So I thank the member for that question. Of course, concerns about the factory were raised by my colleague Dawn Bowden, and those concerns were taken up not simply with the local authority, but with other authorities who have a responsibility for ensuring safety at the plant. That is now overseen by an outbreak control team, which is drawn from both the local authority, the Local Health Board, Public Health Wales, the Environmental Health Department, Food Standards Agency, and by the Health and Safety Executive. That team is investigating the causes of the number of cases we have seen at KEPAC Merthyr. It is still unclear, in the advice that I have seen, as to whether or not the rise in cases was caused at the factory or was imported into the factory from the community. And that work continues to go on, and the Welsh Government is regularly updated on the meetings of that team. There's one today, and we will be guided by their investigations and the recommendations that I expect to hear from them.
Melding.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, I note that the World Health Organization is likely to modify its advice on the cloud effect that is generated through breathing, and that the particles very fine that are so generated can hang in the air for hours, and they are particularly prone to do so in small spaces like toilets where there are hand dryers, for instance. And can you assure us that as we gain more scientific knowledge of this disease, that you will be modifying your guidance, that's the proper thing to do, and ensuring that it gets to those who need to know about it, such as those managing factories?
Melding for that. Some of us had an opportunity to discuss this issue briefly with the Chief Medical Officer earlier today. His interpretation of the evidence that has emerged at the World Health Organization is that the bulk of transmission is still more likely to be communicated through droplets rather than through fine particles, and that was the view of Welsh virologists yesterday. But of course, I can give the member an assurance that we continue to follow the science. And if the science changes and if our actions need to change, then we will take those actions in line with the emerging evidence. And coronavirus has turned out all the way through to be a virus that causes surprises. And we know an awful lot more now than we did only weeks ago, and the evidence that emerged yesterday and overnight will form part of the body of evidence that the Welsh Government will continue to draw upon.
Dawn Bowden.
Diolch, Lewis, and thank you for the answers to Dennis Jules' question, First Minister, and thank you also for your acknowledgement of the work that's been going on there with the company, with the council, and with other partners for some considerable weeks before this. And can I thank the incident management team in Merthyr Tydfil and the Welsh Government for the updates and on the incident. That's been invaluable in keeping us informed. And so far, it is encouraging to hear that this incident remains contained and that there's no evidence at this stage of community transmission, and I thank everyone involved in cooperating to ensure that that remains the case. However, in light of this incident, can you advise me whether any other large workplaces in the area, particularly those with similar environmental characteristics that may not always be able to manage social distancing, are also to be inspected and their workforce tested? And can I ask what measures the IMT are putting in place to ensure that issues of community cohesion are also addressed, given that there's a very large Eastern European migrant workforce at these plants?
Well, thank Dawn Bowden for that and for her acknowledgement of the work that the incident management team have carried out. They were unanimously agreed recently that an outbreak should not be declared at the factory, and this should continue to be managed as an incident. Dawn Bowden Clowyd makes two important points. Firstly, in relation to inspections of other factories, I certainly would expect there to be an alert, a heightened awareness amongst the Health and Safety Executive and others of the need to do that. And can I pay tribute for a moment to the role of the trades unions in all of these sites? Much of from the frontline intelligence we get comes through the trade union movement and alerts us to the need to inspect, and were the evidence to point in that direction to extend testing to other settings. The second point that Dawn Bowden makes is also very important, Clywyd, issues of community cohesion, and that has been very much in our minds at all the sites that have been involved in outbreaks or incidents. And what we have learnt a number of things about the need for messaging in languages other than English and in Welsh, to find different ways of communicating with workforces drawn from other parts of the world, and then to communicate clearly to other people in those areas about when there is evidence, or in these cases, no evidence, of extensive wider community transmission, to allay fears that inevitably arise that this may be an outbreak or an incident not confined to the plant itself.
Question 2, Caroline Jones.
Question 2, Caroline Jones.
Diolch, Lewis. What plans does the Welsh Government have to review its guidance on the use of face coverings by members of the public?
So the Welsh Government guidance encourages but does not mandate the use of 3-layer face coverings in public settings where social distancing is not possible. That guidance is kept continually under review.
Thank you, First Minister. We now know that the SARS-CoV-2 virus can be spread not just by coughs and sneezes, but be carried in microdroplets, and that it can spread by asymptomatic carriers. Microdroplets are generated by breathing and talking. We also know that face coverings can help to catch microdroplets and prevent the spread of coronavirus. So why then is Wales one of the only countries in the world that does not mandate the use of face coverings in some settings? I would like to see face coverings mandatory in all public settings. First Minister, will you now commit to the mandatory requirements of face coverings on public transport and an urgent review into whether that guidance should extend to all public places? Diolch.
Well, Llywydd, what I commit to is to keeping the issue continuously under review and to take the advice of those who are best placed to provide that advice to us. And the context changes and the advice may change, and if the advice changes, then our position in Wales will change as well. But I should say to the member, wearing a face covering is not by itself a magic bullet that prevents people from contracting or spreading coronavirus. And our own Chief Medical Officer has always had an anxiety, and it's an anxiety I see being shared in other parts of the world, that when people wear a face covering, they act in ways that they wouldn't if they weren't wearing it, and they act in more risky ways as well. The belief that by wearing a face covering it is somehow all right to not to observe social distancing, for example, not to take care in how you put it on and how you take it off, not to avoid touching your face, because we know that that is one of the ways in which the virus is most likely to be spread. So while the member makes a persuasive case, and I listen to it very carefully for what she advocates, I think it is important that we attend to the fact that there are potential downsides as well as upsides to this. That's why we keep it continuously under review. And if the position changes, then the Welsh Government's position will change as well.
Laura Ann Jones.
Gareth. Does the First Minister agree with me that it's both farcical and confusing to have a different approach from one side of the border to the other, especially when you consider the amount of people travelling on a daily basis from one side to another? Can the First Minister assure me that he'll put aside his different and his need to be different to England for the sake of being different, and do what the Union Unite suggests and urgently review the guidance to adopt a more common sense approach?
So I welcome the member back to the chamber, and I think she has just said what I said, which is that we do keep it continuously under review. And I'm very alert to the impact of the border here. There are actions on either side of the border. It is not a matter of England makes a change and Wales must follow. It would be perfectly possible to have had a conversation with the UK Government where we could have reached a joint position. Unfortunately, that conversation was never offered to us. But the member makes an important point about consistency along the border, and that is very much in my mind as we continuously review our position in relation both to face coverings but other changes that have been made elsewhere as well.
Rhiannon Passmore. Rhiannon Passmore, we can't hear you at the moment. Can you say something? No, we still can't hear you. Can it be immediately rectified, or I'm going to have to move on? No, I'm sorry. We're going to have to move on, Rhiannon Passmore. So I now go to the questions by the leaders of the parties, and Arweinydd y Ceidwadwyr, Paul Davies.
Leader of the Conservatives, Paul Davies.
First Minister, key to tackling the spread and indeed the eradication of this awful virus is Wales's testing programme and its ability to reach as many people as possible in order to better inform people before they make decisions about socially interacting. We know that lab capacity in Wales is just over 15,000, which, as you know, is still a long way off the potential 20,000 tests per day that the Welsh Government proposed in the Test, Trace, Protect document. Indeed, we know that the total number of tests in the last 24 hours was 3,054, which means that just a fifth of capacity has been used. And more worrying, according to official figures, no extra tests were carried out between the 28th of June and the 5th of July for healthcare workers across Wales. Clearly, this shows that more testing could and should be done. First Minister, can you tell us why the levels of testing in Wales are so low? And can you also tell us what the Welsh Government is doing to increase the level of testing across the country?
Well, Llywydd, I think the member might have acknowledged the fact that at 15,000 tests, that figure is the most we've ever had and has risen very steadily over recent weeks, and more capacity will be added to that as well. I think the issue on testing, however, the number of tests that are used, is a good deal more complicated than he suggests, because underlying his question is the assumption that more is automatically better. And the truth of the matter is that as prevalence of the disease falls in Wales, so there are fewer people with symptoms and fewer people who come forward for testing. and that is not a bad thing in itself, because it demonstrates to us that there is a great deal less of coronavirus surrounding Wales today than there was a week ago or a month ago or 3 months ago. So it's not just a matter of saying, if you're doing more tests, you must be doing better. You need to use your tests for the right reason. You need to use them in the right place. All healthcare settings have direct access to testing. So where clinicians believe the tests need to be carried out, they are carried out, and we are carrying out more tests on patients in hospital than ever before, as more people return to other aspects of the health service. While the prevalence of the disease is falling, there will be fewer people with symptoms, and fewer people will therefore come forward themselves, as everybody can, asking for a test. So it's a bit more complicated, Llywyd, that's what I'm saying, than a simple assertion that if the number of tests are going down, it's a bad thing, and if the number of tests are going up, it's a good thing.
First Minister, last week you made it clear that Welsh ministers have the powers through regulations to take local action to reduce some of the freedoms in order to deal with local outbreaks. It's absolutely crucial that freedoms are not curtailed any further, so if at any point the Welsh Government decides to take the decision to introduce localised lockdowns in the future, then it must be made absolutely clear to the people of Wales exactly why that decision has been made, along with providing the latest scientific and medical evidence to justify the Welsh Government's decision. Therefore, First Minister, can you tell us what discussions you have already had with public health officials about the ability to create localised lockdowns if the evidence was strong enough to suggest that the virus was prevalent in certain communities across Wales? And has the Welsh Government started undertaking any modelling in relation to introducing localised lockdowns in the future? And what assessment have you made of the impact that having different lockdown restrictions in different parts of Wales could have?
Let me begin by agreeing with the first point that the member made. I don't think we should ever restrict people's freedoms unless the case for doing so is very clear and that we have the evidence to justify it. I'm quite sure that when his political colleagues in London made that decision in relation to Leicester, that those matters were very much in their mind at the time, and we would expect to follow exactly that approach. In relation to evidence, I am very keen to see us reach a point where we are formally able to agree Welsh membership of the Joint Biosecurity Centre. So I discussed this matter with Michael Gove yesterday morning. This is the body that will draw together intelligence from all sorts, from all parts of the United Kingdom, and give us the very best evidence of local developments in relation to the disease. And that will be available in all parts of the United Kingdom, and there will be common standards and common approaches to the evidence that is used, the triggers that will be identified, and indeed some of the approaches that will be taken as a result of that. I've always thought that the Joint Biosecurity Centre would be something that would be helpful to us in Wales. I believe, from the advice that I have had from my officials, that we are close to a position where we can sign up to it formally, and I pressed Mr Gove yesterday to accelerate those discussions so that we can reach that position. When we have a joint, and the word joint is very important, it cannot be a UK body to which devolved administrations are an appendage. It must be a genuinely joint centre. Then I think the information that it provides will go a long way to answering many of the questions that Mr Davies has raised with me this morning.
First Minister, as new cases continue to fall across Wales, the Welsh Government and local health boards must start looking at other NHS treatment and services. And as you know, nearly 500,000 people were waiting for treatment before the COVID-19 pandemic hit. Now, the Royal College of Surgeons have warned that delays to surgery will already have resulted in an increased need for complex surgery, and the British Heart Foundation have also said that as services remain unavailable, the urgency of these procedures is increasing, creating a significant cohort of patients who need urgent treatment. First Minister, this in turn will continue to stretch the capacity of the NHS. Now, in light of the very valid concerns raised by organisations like the Royal College of Surgeons and the British Heart Foundation, what strategic discussions is the Welsh Government having with local health boards to ensure that urgent and planned surgeries can take place and that the workforce can cope with the backlog of elective operations? And what assurances can you offer to people across Wales who are waiting for treatment that they will be able to access NHS treatments and services? And how are you best supporting local health boards to accelerate the resumption of planned surgeries across Wales?
Thank the member for that important question. On Friday, when I will be able to make public the results of the current 3-week review period, I hope to be able to explain to people in Wales the extent to which we are using the headroom we hope we have to go on lifting the lockdown regime in Wales, the extent to which we are using that headroom to go on reopening the NHS here in Wales, because that is an important part of the way in which lockdown restrictions are being eased, opening up more of our primary and secondary care services. I don't want to say to the member or to anybody else that this is a straightforward process. An enormous amount of work is going on to create green zones, as they are called, inside our hospitals, coronavirus-free zones, so that operations can resume and people can be confident in returning to those settings, that they won't run the risk of being infected by people who are already suffering from the disease. By itself, that will limit the number of operations, for example, that a theatre can carry out in any one day, because the levels of biosecurity that are necessary to prevent the spread of coronavirus are very real and will have a limiting effect, in the best of circumstances, on the extent to which activity can resume. At the same time, Llywyd, the NHS is having to prepare for the winter that lies ahead, the flu season that lies ahead, and the warnings we all hear of a resurgence of coronavirus in winter conditions. So while our colleagues in the NHS are making enormous efforts, demonstrated in the second quarter plans that they have submitted to the Welsh Government to reopen the health service, this will be a balancing act of many competing demands, and nobody should believe that there is an easy or straightforward path back to the levels of activity that the NHS in Wales and elsewhere in the United Kingdom were able to conduct in a pre-COVID world.
Arweinydd Plaid Cymru, Adam Price.
Plaid Cymru leader Adam Price. Thank you, Llywydd. May I, at the outset, endorse the comments on the appalling genocide in Srebrenica. They will not be forgotten.
Of a care home in my constituency. His employees, as he puts it, are hard-working and undervalued, and he urgently wants the Welsh Government to honour the promise made in May that every worker in a care setting would receive £500. Now, waiting for Westminster has never served us well in Wales, and yes, the UK Treasury needs to find its moral compass by making the payment tax-free. But there is something that the Welsh Government could do to ensure workers receive they receive in full the amount of money they were promised, whatever Westminster decides. In December last year, doctors in Wales were promised that their tax bills would be covered by the NHS while working overtime. Will you, if necessary, offer the same tax cover to carers so they are not left out of pocket?
So it's an important point that Adam Price makes, and we continue to discuss exactly that with the trade unions in particular. But to make that decision today will be simply to allow the UK government off the hook, because any suggestion that we will pay it will guarantee that they will not do the right thing and, as you say, rediscover their moral compass on this issue. So we have continued to be in what we regard as constructive discussions from our point of view with the UK Treasury, outlining ways in which this payment could be made free of tax and national insurance. I am not at the point where I think those discussions can be drawn to an end and simply to allow the UK government to be absolved of its responsibilities and to spend more Welsh government money on responsibilities that they themselves ought to discharge. We're not asking them for money, as I know Adam Price understands. We're simply asking them not to take away money that belongs to Welsh workers.
The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the importance of the care sector, and I have to say, after reading the Health Committee report today, also its neglect. The care sector has been characterised by zero-hour contracts and low pay for decades. Pay scale research estimates the hourly rate on average, for example, to be £8.19. Valuing our care workers must surely start with a decent pay structure comparable with other professions. In February, your government promised that the lowest paid NHS staff would receive the real living wage of £9.30 an hour. Should not that principle, as a first step to parity with the NHS, be applied now to workers in the care sector? First Minister, in truth, can we afford not to?
Well, I agree with Adam Price, Llywydd, that the coronavirus crisis has shone a spotlight on to the sector and the way in which it has been undervalued over so many years. In the end, the challenge is not for government. It is a challenge for the whole of our society as to the extent to which we are prepared to pay for decent levels of wages and proper working conditions for people in that sector. And governments successively at the UK level have failed to come forward with proposals for paying for social care. We were very close to it at one point in 2015 as a result of the Dilnot review, and then necessary legislation fell because of a general election. We've never been able to get back to that. The Welsh Government directly pays through health boards for NHS staff, and I was very pleased when I was the Health Minister to be able to strike a deal which has guaranteed that the lowest paid people in the health service have always been paid ever since the real living wage. We are not the employer in relation to this sector. But I want to be positive in my reply to Adam Price's question, because I agree with him that the result of coronavirus ought to be that as a society we have to be prepared to find the money to make this a sector that recognises the significance of the work that it does every single day.
The Royal College of Nursing and 13 health unions have written to the English Prime Minister, as he's come to be known, asking for discussions on an early NHS pay rise. Will you show the way and also reward our NHS staff? If the current health crisis has taught us anything, it is that valuing those who look after us at the dawn of our lives, the twilight of our lives, every point in between, should be the priority of any caring nation. During your leadership bid, First Minister, you said that you would not change tax rates unless compelled to do so. Do you now believe that the hard work of health and care workers is a compelling enough reason for you to change your mind?
So we will continue in the way that we do, through the spirit of social partnership, to negotiate with the health unions and the local health boards in relation to pay and conditions in the health service. That's the way we do it, and that's the way we intend to carry on doing so. Those discussions are not always easy, nor should they be. Social partnership is not a cosy regime, but it is a place where we get together to try and find common solutions to common problems, and that's how we will approach the pay issue with our NHS staff. My party made a commitment, Llywydd, not to raise income tax rates during this Senedd term. That remains our policy position.
Arweinydd Plaid Brexit.
Leader of the Brexit Party, Mark Reckless.
First Minister, do you consider it satisfactory that this Senedd, operating under Welsh Government guidance, should just have 2 opportunities to question you in person over a period of 6 months? Do you prefer to have scrutiny through daily press conferences, broadcast live, with no opportunity for opposition reply, with many of those media outlets financially dependent on Welsh Government? Do you consider it to be in the public interest for the state broadcaster to subject us to a disquisition on what your favourite cheese is? And how is it consistent with the BBC Charter or fairness that last night, just for example on Ineos, we were treated by BBC Wales to the Labour Minister, the Labour Council Leader, the Labour MS and the Labour Funding Union with no opposition reply whatever? You say your urgent priority is to review every street name and every statue in Wales to see whether it accords with the demands of an organisation that wants to defund the police. Isn't it time instead to defund the BBC?
Well, Llywydd is never a dog, but the member is prepared to whistle at it, and he's here doing it again today. I answer questions on the floor of the Senedd whenever the Senedd asks me to do so, and it's not my decision as to when that should be, nor should it be. I've answered questions throughout the coronavirus crisis, every time the Senedd has asked me to, in committee or in plenary, and that's my position. I am not responsible for the BBC, and neither should I be. It is not a state broadcaster in any sense, and the member should know better than to imply that it is, or to imply that it is not right of a broadcaster to interview those people who are elected to represent people in a particular area, whatever party that may be, in whichever part of Wales that might be.
So the First Minister is content with that scrutiny. 4 Labour voices, no opposition voices, and it is far from the only example. If one depends on one's news on BBC Wales and many of the organisations funded by Welsh Government to provide news, one would have the impression that under our great helmsman, Mark Drakeford, that there has been a great success in management of the COVID crisis in Wales. Is the reality not that infection rates in Wales have been higher than in England and substantially higher than in Scotland and Northern Ireland, despite far less testing? Isn't it the case that 1,097 people were moved from hospitals into care homes without testing? And talk about Westminster waiting for them 2 to 3 weeks after England and Scotland before we saw testing in care homes. Isn't the reality that the management both of the COVID crisis and of the economy has been worse in Wales, and the people of Wales will be paying for it for a very long time?
As I said to the member, I will answer questions on the floor of this Senedd whenever the Senedd asks me to do so. So it's a matter for him, not for me, how often that takes place. I entirely reject what he said. There are always people who happen to live in Wales that wish they didn't. The answer to that is in their own hands rather than mine.
Question 3, Gareth Bennett.
Question 3, Gareth Bennett.
Diolch, Llywydd. What assessment has the First Minister made of the impact of COVID-19 on the economy in South Wales Central?
Wales remains in the grip of the coronavirus crisis, but as circulation of the virus diminishes, economic activity in South Wales Central continues to recover with the support of both Welsh and UK governments.
I thank the First Minister for his response. Getting a coordinated response from different governments within the UK has been one of the problems of the crisis we are living through, and it is clear that the economy in Wales will suffer more because of the First Minister's insistence on doing things differently here. I feel the problem may be aggravated by the First Minister possessing an inflated idea of his own importance. One issue may be that the salary of the First Minister of Wales is almost equal to that of the UK Prime Minister. Given that an important trade association in Wales has just declared no confidence in the First Minister, I wonder if he really believes he is worth such a salary.
I work as hard as I can every day to attend to the needs of the people in Wales. I understand that the member has a great deal of difficulty in understanding the difference between what is possible for Wales and what is possible elsewhere. I see in his last contribution, my attention was drawn to his contribution on the 24th of June, when he said, we know, he said, that Mark Drakeford didn't even attend COBRA meetings for several weeks when he was able to do so. Maybe I'll put on record, because I'm sure the member wouldn't intentionally wish to mislead people, that there is not a single COBRA meeting to which I have been invited, to which I did not attend.
Andrew Arty-Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Could I put on record my thanks as well to the Commission staff and to yourself as Presiding Officer for making these facilities available today for the first hybrid assembly. First Minister, the economies of South Wales are very intertwined, and the news yesterday about the INEOS reconsideration, shall we call it, of their proposals in Bridgend affects South Wales Central, and in particular the Vale of Glamorgan, where there's a lot of transit back and forth for jobs. Can you clarify exactly what is going on with the proposal, As I understand it, INEOS have put a halt on consideration of advancing the project at the moment, but they haven't actually stopped the project. And comments about not trusting the company are deeply unhelpful from the constituency MS, who was on telly last night saying such things. Surely we should be working night and day to convince INEOS that Bridgend and the wider South Wales economy are an ideal home for their ambitious proposals for this new facility.
Thank the member for that. And I want to say to him that the Welsh Government and the contractors we have employed have worked tirelessly to ensure that the site was made ready in line with INEOS's tight timescales, and that work continued despite flooding earlier in the year and the coronavirus crisis. So we have worked really hard to try to meet the requirements that the company had laid out. So we were inevitably disappointed on the 2nd of July when officials were told, not ministers, officials were told that the company intended to suspend its plans for investment in Wales and in Portugal, pending a review. The company was due to sign an important agreement with the Welsh Government on Monday of this week. And it was very disappointing to us, after all the efforts that have been made, that that wasn't possible. But let me agree with what Andrew Davies has said. While there is a possibility that this company would yet come to Wales, we must work positively with them to make every argument to bring that about. My colleague Ken Skates spoke directly with the company on Monday evening, and I know that he made that point to them, that despite our sense of disappointment so very late in the day to find that the company may be having second thoughts, anything that we can still do to persuade them of the merits of coming to Bridgend and the outstanding workforce that is available to them there, we will never give up on making that case up until the point where the company make a final determination.
Vicky Howells.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, I've been in discussion with very many businesses in the Cynon Valley who are extremely grateful for the financial support that they've received from the Welsh Government under the Economic Resilience Fund. And I note that in order to access that fund, they need to sign up to the Welsh Government's economic contract. Would you be able to give us an assessment of how you think signing up to that economic contract will be of benefit both to the economy and society of the South Wales Central region moving forward?
Thank Vicky Howells for that, Llywydd, and I know that she will recognise that the incredible speed at which everything has had to happen during the coronavirus crisis means that the sort of detailed discussion of an economic contract that we would normally have with businesses hasn't been possible. Before the crisis hit, we had agreed economic contracts with 385 companies in Wales. Today, that's over 4,000 companies who've committed to the principles of the economic contract. And the principle is very important. It says to companies that when the Welsh public is finding money to support them in the work they do to help them to sustain and create new jobs, that the Welsh public is entitled to a return on that investment that goes beyond the interests of the company itself, and that there are important things that we want to create across Wales, a low-carbon future, increasing levels of investment in skills, a fair work approach to Wales. All of those things are important, and when we strike an economic contract with a company, it is those additional returns on the investment that the Welsh public is making that we seek to negotiate. And the good news is, Llywydd, that companies in Wales very readily see the benefits of that. They too want a future in Wales that allows them to go on trading successfully in a country where we don't have low pay, where we don't have low skills, and where we are focused, as the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act requires us to be, on making decisions today that give those who come after us a proper chance of a successful future.
Tynwyd cwestiwn 4 yn ôl.
Question 4 is withdrawn. Question 5, Rhina Piorwerth. Thank you, Llywydd. Will the First Minister make a statement on reopening the tourism sector in North Wales?
Thank you for that question. Llywydd, lifting the stay local requirement allows people to travel around Wales. Outdoor visitor attractions can open subject to strict social distancing and hygiene guidelines remaining in place. I have noted that self-contained accommodation and outdoor hospitality should prepare to reopen in the next week.
Thank you for that response. There are two things I'd like to raise. First of all, an appeal once again for extending support to tourism and hospitality businesses. Losing so much of their season will mean that they will have already lost a great deal of their annual turnover, and time is short to make up for that, of course. But the second point is on the nature of tourism. The First Minister will know, as do I, about the very real concern that exists about the return of tourism, because the threat of the virus has not disappeared, and therefore I support a campaign on Anglesey, for example, to remind tourists to stick to those steps to safeguard communities and to respect the people around them. But I also think that now is an opportunity to reconsider the nature of the relationship between tourism and our communities in a more fundamental way. So would the First Minister agree with me and tourism representatives who I've been speaking to in my constituency that we need to use this period to lay the foundations for a new kind of tourism that gives greater ownership and control to the local level, which makes the sector more sustainable, which responds to local concerns about the impact of too much tourism and ensures local benefits from tourism?
Well, Llywydd, may I thank Rhyn ap Iorwerth for that interesting question, and just to say in the first place that I acknowledge the fact that tourism is extremely important to the people of Ynys Môn, and the reason why we have proceeded carefully, step by step, is to ensure that the sector will be ready to welcome visitors back safely, and doing that by taking the communities with us on that journey. And it's important that the industry works closely with the local people to prepare and to do it in a way where the voice of the local people impacts the nature of the industry. And that's exactly what Rhyn has said about the opportunity that presents itself for us to rethink all of this. It's important. And when I have had discussions with the group that we've convened, and I had the opportunity to do that recently on the 18th of June, one thing that struck me was the point that the people in the group raised, that they are eager to use the opportunity that they have to recreate the relationship between people working in the field and people living locally. And I agree with what Rhyn ap Iorwerth was saying about optimising the opportunity that we have and to do things together and cautiously over the ensuing weeks, because if we do it successfully, there will be more than we can do to help the sector in the remaining season and to do more to support the sector by doing so.
Saunders.
Diolch Llywydd. First Minister, 24,000 people work in the manufacturing industry in food and drink, with around 230,000 employed in the wider supply chain. There are around 3,700 different Welsh food and drink producers on retails, and a vital stage is the hospitality sector. Will you consider reopening the hospital sector indoors from the 13th of July? But more importantly, advise them of this now. If not, what do you say to the Welsh Independent Restaurant Collective, whose survey found that at least 30,000 jobs losses are expected in the sector, and that nearly half of these have happened already? Could you explain to me how it is seen to be safe for children to be in classrooms eating their lunch, but yet unsafe for adults to sit inside a restaurant?
Well, Llywydd, I think it's very easy to explain the difference. As far as I know, alcohol isn't being served in schools in Wales, whereas it would be in the context that the member refers to. The idea that these things are somehow comparable is clearly nonsensical as soon as you begin to consider it. No, I won't be reopening indoor hospitality from the 13th of July, but I'm very glad indeed that we've been able to work with the sector and that outdoor hospitality will be reopening in Wales from that date. And what we will then do is to work with the sector to see that they make a success of that reopening, that they deliver on the many compensating measures that they have, I think, in a very committed and imaginative way, come forward with measures to mitigate the impact of coronavirus. And provided we can see that that is being done successfully, then we will be able to move to reopening indoor hospitality. And what I think the member never seems to grasp is that unless you're prepared to do this in a careful way, then people won't come back to use those facilities. People won't have the confidence to come back to restaurants and cafes and public houses in Wales unless they know that we have worked together to make those places safe. The weeks ahead in which the sector will deliver, I feel confident, on the promises it has made, will be an investment in making sure that when we are able to move to indoor hospitality, people in Wales will have the confidence to return to it, and that will have stood that sector and those businesses in very good stead.
Question 6, Sian.
Question 6, Sian Gwenllian. Will you provide an update on the Welsh Government's discussions regarding the 94 jobs that are under threat at Northwood Hygiene Products Factory in Penygroes in the Arfon constituency?
May I thank Sian Gwenllian for that question. Formal consultation on closure proposals for the Norwood factory ended on the 4th of July. Despite efforts by the local workers and management, Gwynedd County Council and Welsh Government, the company has decided to go ahead with closure plans. Efforts now turn to supporting staff and seeking alternative investment for the site.
I thank your government for being so willing to provide assistance and to support the alternative proposal by the workforce in Penygroes, but unfortunately, as you have said, the company has rejected that opportunity for commercial reasons, and they are making the 94 staff redundant, which is a huge blow. But we must continue to seek to find alternative use for the site. So thank you for giving an assurance that your government officials will continue to work with Gwynedd Council and others to look at the options available, including attracting a new buyer for the site. 94 jobs in Dyffryn Nantlle would equate to thousands of jobs in more highly populated areas in Wales, and deserves the same effort and the same attention from your government as we seek a way forward.
Well, thank you, Sian Gwenllian. I acknowledge the point that she makes about the impact of the loss of 94 jobs in a place such as Nantlle Vale, and the closure of the plant is a very big blow for the workforce and the community. And as Sian Gwenllian acknowledged, the officials, Welsh Government officials and the officers of Gwynedd Council have been working hard to try and defend those jobs, putting money on the table to try and support those workers that have been loyal to the company over a long period of time. But as Sian Gwenllian says, we must think together about how we can attract alternative investment into the site. Welsh Government is leading a regional remedial partnership, and we will be looking at the future of North Wales post-COVID, but also the whole of North Wales, but also in the context that Sian Gwenllian will be facing after the decision to close the factory.
Ramsey.
Question 7, Nick Ramsey.
Diolch, Llywydd. Will the First Minister provide an update on the latest block grant drawdown from the UK Government?
Thank the member for that question. Alongside many Whitehall departments, the Welsh Government has drawn down repayable cash from the UK Contingencies Fund. In our case, £857 million has been used to front-load our actions to support businesses and public services in the face of the global coronavirus pandemic.
Thank you, First Minister, and apologies for the rather dry phrasing of the question, but you got my drift. First Minister, as you say, the UK Government has just signed off the drawdown of the £857 million, and the Welsh Government budget has been significantly uplifted since the start of the pandemic, and rightly so. As the focus now turns to leaving lockdown and getting the economy moving again, will you look at providing support for the housing market and particularly first-time buyers? It's likely in the statement today the Chancellor will be announcing a possible stamp duty holiday, certainly stamp duty relief for buyers. Is that something you will be considering here? My colleague Laura Ann Jones in her question earlier spoke about possible distortions along the border with regard to COVID-19 processes. There will be no greater distortion than that to the housing market if there's greater relief provided for stamp duty in England than there is for LTT here in Wales. So will you pledge to look at this?
It's just important to say that the £857 million is repayable cash. It's not money that we can use to invest in Wales. And while I want to recognise the help we had through the Secretary of State and through the Treasury in securing that, let's put it in context. The Department of Health and Social Services in Whitehall has drawn down £25 billion of repayable cash from the contingencies fund. So we are rather at the small change end of that market. We will wait to see what the Chancellor of the Exchequer has to say today. Our stamp duty or land transaction tax regime in Wales already absolves far, far more people from paying that tax in Wales than would be the case across all borders. So if the member would want to regard that as a distortion, then it is a distortion very much in favour of his constituents in living this side of the border. But what we've learned, Llywydd, over many years is never to rely on the headlines that the Treasury trail in advance of any statement. We will wait to hear what the Chancellor of the Exchequer has to say. We will look at ways in which Wales will lose money, as well as ways in which we may gain, and then the Cabinet here will come to a set of conclusions based in the round on the impact of any changes that may be announced today on the budget and on policies here in Wales.
Can all that question?
Finally, question 8, Jenny Rathbone.
What action is the Welsh Government planning to take to tackle the underlying health inequalities that have made some citizens more vulnerable to COVID-19 than others?
So we can thank the member for that very important question. The Welsh Government continues to do everything we can to address the unacceptable inequalities in health outcomes between Wales's most and least deprived communities, and as we have seen in the COVID context for the BAME community in particular. Reducing inequality is a central ambition of prosperity for all and lies at the heart of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act.
Thank you, First Minister. At the root of this problem is poor diet. We know that the food manufacturers spend billions of pounds encouraging people to eat processed food high in fat, sugar and salt, and that this obviously is not nourishing, and it leads to obesity, which then leads to diabetes, heart disease and indeed cancer, and now COVID-19. So I wonder what measures the government is considering to transform the food system so that is blighting our lives, not just to improve breastfeeding and weaning, but also compliance with healthy food regulations in schools, and tackle the multi-million-pound advertising by the food industry, which encourages people to eat the wrong things. When did you last see an advert for vegetables?
So let me agree with Jenny Rathbone that poor diet is the product of poverty. And it is families who cannot afford to buy a diet that is balanced and has the variety in it that others of us are able to take for granted that leads to obesity in those families. We are engaged in a whole series of different measures to try and address that. Not all the levers are in our own hands. The UK Government carried out a consultation on advertising earlier last year. And in our contribution to that consultation, we urged the UK Government to be more mandatory in its approach, not simply to advise companies on best practice, but to require advertising not to be aimed, for example, at children or around schools. We are considering the report issued by the House of Lords Select Committee on Food Poverty, Health and the Environment, released on the 6th of July, called Hungry for Change, Fixing the Failures in Food. And that does indeed highlight a series of issues that the member herself has just drawn to our attention. And there are a number of recommendations in that report that we will want to draw on in the work that we will do here in Wales as part of our own consultation over the autumn period on the Wales food environment, which is planned by my colleague Vaughan Gethin.
Diolch i'r Prif Weinidog.
I thank